because of the way I was trained and because of my early experience, there are things that are sort of ingrained in what I do, and I'll find myself in a sort of traditional American classroom and things just don't sit right. One of the things that we do in New Zealand is we have a cyclic curriculum. So there isn't a grade 1 curriculum, there is a new entrance through second grade curriculum. And you have to learn to add two-digit numbers, right? Obviously my new entrants are not going to be adding two-digit numbers. Right on cue. Hold on. My little guys are not going to be adding two-digit numbers. We're introducing numbers. It's out still. But my goal is to work through to then being able to add two-digit numbers. And so how that worked in practice, we had one of the schools I worked at, we had these fantastic resources. They were picture books. But they were math-oriented, math-based picture books. So one was a story about the ants at the picnic. And, you know, there were 10 ants and they all went to the picnic and somebody made themselves sick on the swings and they had to go home. Their mother came and got them, so there was one less ant. And now there were only 9 ants. So we would read through that book like you would with a sort of language experience, you know, with any picture book. You'd read with the kids and you talk and discuss the pictures and what you know, predicting things. So you're bringing reading skills into that. But then we talk about the math and the numbers and how many there were, and we'd count them on the page and look at the one who left, so you've got a visual of that. So then I want you to go and make an ant story for me, right? So maybe I've got kids who are year 1 at this point. Some of them are going to come back and they're going to have their page and it's going to have some ants on it. And that's about it. Can you tell me what happened? Well, here there were 7 ants at our picnic, and then 3 more of them came, and there were 10 more ants altogether. Great, wonderful. Another child has done that picture, but they've been able to write that story for me. Another child's done that picture, and they have been able to write 7 plus 3 equals 10. We've modelled all that on the board, right? So some of the kids have looked at the drawings of the ants, some of the kids have talked about the ants, somebody's come and written the sentence of the ants, and somebody's done the number sentence. So everybody goes away to their station, and they're going to come back to me with what they're capable of doing. They're going to present it. So the learners get to see other people's work. We keep working on those, you know, we're on that type of number sentences for 2 weeks or whatever. Stuff's up on the wall. That goes away because we're working on a new math topic. But in a few weeks' time, number comes back around again. And so we're revisiting it. So my kids, who last time all they were capable of doing was drawing that picture for me and telling me about it, they've had so much more experience to what writing the story would look like, what writing the story with numbers would look like, that they're able to incorporate more information. So my goal is not, we're all going to sit down and learn how to write 7 plus 3 equals 10, because we're not all capable of doing that. But we're all capable of making steps towards that concept. And I've found it to be, particularly with little kids, I've found it to be one of the best ways of teaching math, because you know what it's like, kids learn from each other in a heartbeat. You know, you want gossip or how to play this game or how to do that, and it happens at recess and it's all, you know, somebody else told them once. You can tell them 15 times how to do something, but their peer tells them. And so by getting the kids to come up and explain what they've done, you're boosting them because they get to be, you know, the person up the front, but you're also engaging the other learners as well. So that's always been
I really like that idea because you're showing that all students working on the same skill.
yes,
But all students show you the understanding of that skill and the development will be appropriately to them.
Yep.
And the thing is, folks, it's so simple. That was so simple.
Yep.
It wasn't complex.
It's not. It doesn't have to be complicated.
No, that's exactly right.
It doesn't have to be complicated, and it's not unreasonable to have a different expectation for individual students. This is the goal I want all my students to reach, but I know they're not all going to be there at the same time. So where are some steps that I can see? Do I need to keep samples so that I can show progress? And one of the classes, one of the schools I worked in, this particular school, we used, in the junior school, we used, this was back in the days when you had pieces of paper and you did evaluation, you know, had your objectives and you checked everybody off as to whether they'd achieved that, kept them in a binder. But we used a little symbol. Of course.
I've got some idea for you.
We just did that. So if you'd close the triangle, you'd master it. You know, they're working on it. They've got some basic understanding. I know that kid is chugging along through my objective, and that kid has finished. It's not a number grade, but it's a valid evaluation. I can show you with work samples what they've done. I could get the child could explain what they're doing to me, and this is where some of the data-driven assessment bothers me. I'm with these children all day, every day. If you don't trust me to tell you that child has got a good basic concept of the objective and is working towards mastering it, if you don't trust me to tell you that, how are you trusting me in the classroom all day with these children? Do I need a number? But unfortunately the system we're in at the moment, you've got to have a number beside it, which necessarily doesn't reflect what the child is actually doing. Excuse me. Okay. I wasn't expecting to have a baby. We've got a baby. So the other thing that I did an enormous amount of at home, and it took me a while to sort of start doing it here. And one of the last job I had was actually working down at Northwood Temple, so not being in a public system helped because there was a little bit more freedom within the classroom, so I was able to do more stuff. And one of the things that I have always found to be incredibly useful is bringing all the stuff in and letting the kids go. Let them see the stuff, right? Don't just read about it. Kids love hands-on stuff, so I do, when I taught third grade, we're down at Northwood, it's a reasonably sort of traditional American history curriculum, and I participate with a group that does Revolutionary War reenacting. So I would bring stuff in, right? So I'm not just telling them about my, the clothing of the time. This is your pocket. This is a lady's pocket, and it goes on under your skirts, right? I'd bring my whole gear, all my gear in, get dressed up, and that's under your skirt. Your skirt's got a big slit in it, and you can put all sorts of stuff in here. It's fantastic. So, put it on and whip out your bits and pieces, and let the kids handle things, right? And the discussion that's generated from being able to bring something in, and what you find, anytime you can get a person to come in and speak to the kids, particularly someone who'll bring stuff, you're going to have such an impact. And I know that can be difficult sometimes in public school, but reaching out to community is really important, because I had a message last week actually a few weeks ago now, from a girlfriend who I talk with going on 20 years ago, and she's in Kansas, and they're doing the Revolutionary War, and she said, how would you feel about Zooming? Well, 2 years ago, if you'd asked me to Zoom with a class of 5th graders, I'd have had a panic, but now we're all good with Zoom. And so she had 2 classes full of 5th graders, and I had my phone set up in my living room, and I was able to do that demonstration where I put on all the clothes and talked about things, and then of course the kids all had questions, and it's always fantastic because there's always some kid with just an absolute beady eye that misses nothing. And this little girl said, I can see that your fingernails are sparkly. What kind of nail polish did they have in the 1700s? I'm like, shh, that wasn't any nail polish, I didn't take it off. But anytime you can get anybody, whether physically in or use through Zoom, and I mean use your social media and use your parents and their friends. There's always some crazy lady like me who's got a whole Revolutionary War get up, who's going to dress up in your living room and talk to your kids. Obviously you want to know who you're engaging with before you broadcast them to a room full of children, but don't let the fact that you haven't necessarily got a resource on hand stop you from bringing that resource in. Museums, libraries, the botanical gardens. I'm quite confident that there's a whole lot of people now who never in a million years would have thought that they would Zoom with you, would be more than happy to Zoom with your class. The pandemic's been pretty horrendous.
The library's been Zooming with you too.
Yeah. So, but it's made a lot of us realise that there's things that we can do that we would not have, been nearly as comfortable with. I talked about differentiated evaluation. In the sort of artefacts, and anytime you can do hands-on stuff with your kids, use your kids as well. Right? You're doing soil and erosion and all those sort of things. I guarantee you there's a child in your class with a pile of rocks at home who probably actually knows quite a bit about those. Don't ignore the kids as a resource. Sometimes you might have to bring in things to back them up. You don't want them spreading false information about rocks in the classroom, but if you can have resources there to help back that sort of stuff up, it's always a good option. So, has anybody got any questions about that?
So I know the classroom today is all about numbers.
Yeah.
And everybody has to be on the same level, but what are some ways to go around? Because not every student's on every level or on the same level.
I don't know. Because you and I know that they're not. Every educator in every classroom knows that everybody's not on the same level. But we're just told that they have to be, and it becomes our problem. And I've got no answer.
Well, one of the things you do, because one of the things that we talked about is collecting the data in terms of the process. So rather than always assigning the students a grade on the end product, you can assess the student's progress over time towards that particular goal. And when I taught English in the English department, freshman grammar composition, for several years I had several students that had some kind of writing disability in my class, because we'd started a program for first generation college students. We had expanded our acceptance base. And I had students who on their first paper failed miserably. And then on the second paper, they failed miserably. So what I did is something very similar to what you did here. I had myself a chart, and I decided there was going to be 5 errors that I looked for, fragments, some other things. So when I would grade, so about the time we got to paper number 3, I would count the fragments. Benji, you had 7 fragments in this paper. Next time, let's work on fragments, so I'll help with fragments. Next time, I don't want to see as many fragments. Next time, we just had 5. Then on the next paper, we just had 2. And so that was my way of doing your triangle.
Right.
So when I awarded the grade at the end of the semester, if I saw progress across my charts, I didn't count those first 2 papers that the student wrote and failed miserably.
Right.
Right. So that's exactly what you're doing with your little triangle. I was just doing it when I tried across time. Because it wasn't fair for that student to make a C- or a D and fail the course, but he showed improvement.
Yeah.
Right.
And when he probably well and truly understood what was
He did.
happening.
He gained understanding. He
Yeah.
grew. Yeah, you know. So,
but his execution of it wasn't.
yeah. So you grade. So you say you don't know. Yes, you do. Then you're doing it. You're doing it because it's growth over time.
Yeah,
And the whole idea about what we want to see as teachers folks is progress.
it is.
And not everybody makes progress the same way or in the same amount of
rate.
time.
The problem is trying to fit that into a numbers-driven
Yes.
system.
It,
It's not that we can't do the evaluation. We can evaluate the child. I can tell you exactly where they are and what they're capable of and what they need to work on next. And you were in a position where you could award a grade, but when you're looking at standardised testing and stuff,
you're right.
which happens frighteningly regularly
Yeah.
in an elementary classroom, trying to mesh the two. Yes.
So do you think that, you know, since you are fighting a system where you kind of have to, like, you know, assessments and stuff, do you think it'd be beneficial to kind of keep, like, for example, like a folder of like all what the student is like capable of doing throughout the year to kind of, yeah, so to
Yeah.
kind of, not that, like, you know, like you're saying, every kid is at a different level, but if you have some type of proof that they've learned,
Yeah.
then that could help you
Absolutely.
when it comes down to
Yep.
assessments and
Showing
not
growth.
trying to say, oh, well, you didn't teach them to that level, well, here it is, right here
Here's
they
where they
are.
started.
Just-
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Portfolios are a lot of work,
Yeah,
but they're definitely a really valuable tool. And the kids, if you're doing a good portfolio with the kids see it. You know, the kids see it. I mean, we're not talking about portfolios where you colour in how many
Yeah,
spelling
that's
words you got right every week. That means you memorise them for 4 days and got them and forgot them again. But those actual work samples that the kids can look back. You keep writing samples from kids, and if you keep a writing sample a month for your kids for the year, you will be astounded at the change, as will the kids. Because on a daily basis, we sometimes don't see things. You tend to get a bit bogged down in the daily of it. But if you're taking those samples over a period of time, and again, put that into your planning. So don't just suddenly think, oh, I'll keep that as a sample. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes something crops up and you're like, that went fantastically. I will put that in, it wasn't planned. But if you're going to be doing those sort of things, keep in mind when you're planning what it is that you want to keep.
What I did was I had a journal that they wrote in every morning from the beginning of the year to the very end, and I kept every day, they wrote in this journal, and then at the end of the year, they had a collection, and you could really see the growth from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
That was one way to see how, they're around here somewhere, I don't know exactly where they are right now. But if I find them, you're welcome to look at them if they want to see how you can judge growth.
Yeah. So the other thing that I have found to be, because obviously you can't be bringing stuff in physical, I'm big on the activity. Bring something in to show people, bring something in that they can touch, bring something in that they can make. It's a lot on you. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, it's often a lot of cost. If you're in a situation where you're going to be, you know, in the same grade level, doing very similar things, you can sort of amass. I would try and amass, like I ended up trying to keep it down to a shoebox. so we had a shoebox for this and we had a shoebox for that, and I'd sort of, if I had to buy things, I'd sort of, you know, so that I had them, so that I could find them again. But one of the things that I have always done is literature-based units. So I don't know if the math books that I talked about earlier was something that was quite sort of, I've always loved stories. I maintain that if you gave me a library card, a checkbook and a small van and you know, a dozen children, I could teach them everything. We'd be off and we'd be doing things and we'd be reading books about everything and it would be done. But finding books that you love, that the kids will love, that you can tie this. I'm going to read you Mrs. Armitage on Wheels. Mrs. Armitage on Wheels is quite lovely. Mrs. Armitage was on her bicycle. Breakspear the dog was alongside. A hedgehog walked across the street. Tring, tring went Mrs. Armitage on the bell. But what the bike needs, Mrs. Armitage said to herself, is a really loud horn. Mrs. Armitage bought 3 horns. They were all very loud. Beep, beep, honk, 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 hee, grr, went Mrs. Armitage with her horns. So she has, I won't read the whole thing to you, she has a series of disasters, each of which require an addition to her bicycle. So she adds all sorts. She used to wash her hands at some point. She got hungry, so she's got a tray of apples and bananas and cheese and tomato sandwiches. She's put some iron brackets on for the dog. She's built a seat for the dog on the back because he got too tired. It rained, so she's affixed umbrellas. She's got a sail. She got tired of bicycling. It's quite lovely. So, and off they went with the wind behind them, faster and faster and faster until, which we think is going to happen, crash, clang, crunch, clatter, thud. So she's obviously gone far too far. What this bike needs, Breakspear, said Mrs. Armitage, as she picked herself up from the wreckage, is taking to the dump. And what I need is, so what does she need? She might need a new bicycle. What else could she use? Maybe her brakes weren't working. How else could she get about?
Walk.
She could walk. Maybe she needed some new shoes.
Yeah.
What else could she get around on? She could use a scooter. So you're going to, before it ends, I've stopped you and we're getting all sorts of suggestions as to how Mrs. Armitage could then get about, because she can't use the bike. Of course, what she decided what she really needed was some roller skates. But what these roller skates really need, said Mrs. Armitage to herself, what these roller skates really need is so what I can do with this, what I would do with this is we would read that every day of the week, for the whole week. It would be our book for the week, and we would read it every day on the week. And that first day, what do you think she should put on her roller skates? What would you put on your roller skates? So they're all going to head back, and they're going to draw me a picture of their roller skates with the thing that they've added on, and they're going to write about it and tell me what it does. Okay, so I've covered my language objectives for the day. Right, we've actually I've covered oral language because we've had discussions, and I've covered my written language objectives for the day because you've had to actually write, and we've looked at some. We're starting to push into some STEM stuff because we're actually going to start designing what would work. What would work on those skates? Well, I don't want skates, I want a scooter. Well, go ahead and make it a scooter then. Don't let me stop you, just because it says skates in the book. You'd like a scooter, have a scooter. I've got a skateboard. What would you do to your skateboard? So let the kids, doesn't have to be a roller skate design, let the kids go. So we're going to write about that today. So maybe on the following day, we might have an experiment where the kids are running looking at friction, where the kids are running a matchbox car down we've got to build a little cardboard ramp. What happens when we run it on the tile floor? How far does it go on the tile floor? We've had to measure it with our tapes. How far does it go on the rubberised mat? How far does it go on the carpet surface? Okay, we've made a chart. We've got some math objectives. We've had to record that data. Maybe we've got some different cars. Maybe we've got a car that's heavier and a car that's lighter, and we've tried them all on the same floor this time, so we've only got one variable. Now I might talk about just being one variable. They're not necessarily all going to get that concept, but some of them will. The following day, maybe we're actually going to build our thing. Maybe that's started to run through the whole day. Maybe that's a tech design project. Maybe it's an art project. So you've got, cardboard cylinders, and you've got tissue boxes, and you've got tape, and you've got, make me your roller skates, and make me your roller skates with your additions onto them. And you can either do that as an actual science design thing, or simply as an art project that they're then going to present. So, and yeah,
Surprised what the kids come.
you'll be astounded at what they come out with. You'll be astounded. And we my friend and I used to joke, we planned together often, and we use this model regularly, where we would have a book for the week and plan all our activities together. And when we were tired and we couldn't think of anything else, we'd write wall story. And so a wall story was really just a blow up of the book. So we'd read it so many times that the kids all knew. So somebody got assigned the page where she was going into the, the store, and somebody got assigned the page where she was blowing a horn at the other old ladies and frightening them. And so everybody gets to illustrate a page. And maybe they're writing the text, or maybe I'm blowing the text up and gluing it on. But we've ended up with our story on the wall that we can keep reading, because we've been reading it all week. So even if we're not a fluent reader ourselves, we've heard it so many times, we know the flow of the story, and we might be able to go and pick out high frequency words, if that's our reading level. If we're a higher level reader and we've got all those high frequency words, we might be able to come up with some of the more interesting language in there that we can identify, because we've heard it read and we've seen it read. So we're looking at reading some of those higher interest vocabulary words. So there's a lot of ways of making things more hands-on without having to bring in material items, hopefully using resources that you've got within your classroom. I bought this book too. Do you guys know this book? Would you know about Snowflake Bentley? It's fantastic. It's an American book. And he's a kid. He's the person who discovered that snowflakes are all different.
You mentioned that for that assignment, I have a question, sorry.
Sure.
For the assignment that you would give, they would either design rollerblades, or if they wanted to design something else.
Yep.
So is that the idea of allowing students to do the assignment based on what the student provides and not what the teacher wants to hear or see? Like,
Yeah.
do you think that's important?
Yes. Yeah.
So
I mean, because obviously I've got a goal of what I want to see in here. But if you let the kids take some ownership in it, 99 times out of 100, you're going to see and hear a lot more than you expected. in my opinion. We tend to design, not we, the system tends to design things that are very binary. It's right or wrong. This is the answer. But when we're asking a question, how could she travel from A to B? The possibilities are endless. And some of them might be complete fantasy. Those kids will come up with a whole backstory. They'll have reason for it. We know it's made up. But there's a storyline, there's development, the language development within that sort of thing, as opposed to guessing the right thing. So Snowflake Bentley's another one. I can't remember his name. I don't know if he was Bentley somebody. Willie Bentley. Snow, 1865. So he was just a wee kid who was obsessed with snow, and he had been, I think he was looking at stuff under the micro. I bought this book twice and lost it. It's right. I can't remember if he found out that snowflakes were all different, but he was the first person to photograph them. He found that there was a camera with massive magnification on it and pestered his mother until she bought it. It's a true story. And he started photographing snowflakes. And he's pretty much instrumental in how we know that snowflakes are all different. It's an absolutely delightful story about a child discovering something brand new. And so that, the book's really well written. Obviously it's a Caldecott Medal winner, but, it's in Newbury, anyway, same principle. I always try and keep that one in hand when we get the snow in January when we're in school, and so I will try and slot that in. And obviously there's all sorts of teachers pay teachers stuff where there's little booklets about them and, cut and paste facts and stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with doing those sorts of things, but obviously that's not, if that's your entire classroom, it's not really a very exciting place to be. But maybe you might set up with something like this where I wouldn't necessarily be doing that for a whole week. We might do it for a day or two. And I might set up stations. So we'll read the book and there might be a station where you're doing a sort of cut and paste activity. Maybe it's a timeline of his life. Maybe you're doing a section where there's a reading comprehension stuff, where you've got to identify things out of the text and recall information. I can't help myself, but there's going to be at least one art station. So one thing what I did with them was we made, after they'd had a whole lot of images of snowflakes, and that's actually a good station too. You can literally just have like a slideshow of snowflakes. That's the station. Look at the snowflakes. Look at the differences. It's not something we see every day. And then the art thing that I used to like to do is just tinfoil. And if you put it over a piece of like corrugated cardboard, and you can press into it and make a sort of silvery snowflake. It's really pretty. They look like sort of punched tin art by the end of it. You can do paint finishes and things on them too. You can make them out of pipe cleaners, you can make them out of popsicle sticks. And I don't know if any of you have ever done it with borax crystals. You've got to get the water quite hot because it's a saturated solution, and I use big preserving jars, make a saturated solution of borax crystals, and then they can make a snowflake out of pipe cleaners, and you drop it in there on a string, and the crystals form on the pipe cleaners. So you can talk about all those sciencey things, the solution and the crystals forming. Obviously they're not snowflakes, but it kind of works in. And if they're old enough to be able to cut and manipulate, they can make an actual more sort of snowflake than a star type thing. Yes.
So do you think that your approach is a lot like STEM's approach? It seems like you do a lot of science say you use STEM a lot in your classroom?
Yes, without meaning to.
Yeah. Which is awesome, that's why
Yeah,
I'm saying that.
because when everybody started jumping up and down about STEM, I was like, I'm not a science person. How do I do? But I'm a making person. And so the two things go together. I always try to cook with the kids as much as possible. I know that's something that with all the sort of food safety and stuff, it's pretty much out the window. But you know, even a bread maker, buy one at the Goodwill for $10. Throw the stuff in, it makes a loaf of bread magic. Bread and butter. Pardon?
Ice cream maker too.
Oh yeah, so anything like that.
And it's like milk and salt is really all you need.
Yeah. And those are the sorts of things where you, depending who your admin is, depending who knows what's going on, you might be able to slide things in sideways. And obviously it's got to relate to something you're doing in the classroom. You're not just suddenly making a loaf of bread, although, you know, I mean, who's going to complain? Hot bread and butter. But anytime you can do those sorts of things, that I didn't realise the level of science that came into that stuff because I came in with that sort of what we would call language experience. So if we're say our objective is writing recipes, right? And I know in classrooms we sort of write the recipe for making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you know. We're going to make pancakes. We need to put in flour. You measure 1 cup. You measure 1 cup. Now we've got to put in the sugar. I need 2 tablespoons. How many times are you going to put it in? Right, now we've got to stir it. Here you go, you stir it, you stir it, you stir it, you stir it. We've made the pancakes, we've eaten the pancakes. Go and tell me what we did. Well, what did we need? Oh, well, let's make a list of the things we needed. We can't just say, well, we have to make pancakes, you put this in. What else do I need? Let's make a list. So we make a list. We might do that together because, I mean, they're not going to remember all the ingredients and the measurements. So we'll do that together. Now tell me the order of things that we did it. First, then, next. Maybe we're numbering it, maybe we're using, is it called operational language? I can't remember. Next, you know, when you use the next, then transitional language. Yeah, so whatever it is that you're including. And again, and it comes back to this sort of levels of evaluation. You know, if I've got a kid who has a learning disability or who just hasn't had input in his home environment or her home environment, and they're, you know, low level performing on my language, written language, I might get the ingredients copied down, and I might get 3 events, but they might be pretty brief. But when I sit and they tell me what you have to do, they've got it. So they might get yeah, they've got it, but we're not quite there on or I've got 4 or 5 objectives for it. Did they comprehend it? Yes. Could they tell me how to do it? Yes. Did they have all the ingredients? Yes. Did they have 3 steps? Yes. Did they have descriptive language and blah, 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 blah? No. No, they didn't. But they got all of those things. So we've hit that mark. Some of the kids going to have it looking like it's ready to go into print, right? There's a little Ina Garden sitting in the back of your classroom somewhere who's just dying to get this recipe produced for you. But there's a whole lot of other kids who needed that experience of stirring, of I hate to say it, sticking their finger in and seeing what it was like too, because you know somebody did that when you went watching.
But then, folks, you see how she's actually collecting her data, of those steps, and she scaffolded the instruction, and then it shows her how to draw for instruction for the next lesson. She can see that these kids didn't get this part, so they need to be in the group to do this.
Right.
Yeah, you can see all that happening when you're talking.
And again, if you're viewing this in a cyclic time, like we're not going to write recipes once and be done with it. We have to come back. We circle back, and I realise that's problematic with the way our curriculum is designed because it is linear.
Yes. I was gonna say they covered poetry while I was out. I had the flu. They covered poetry in 2 weeks and they're already done with it.
Yeah,
How do you cover?
you don't cover poetry in 2 weeks.
And you're done. That's crazy.
One of the things I did as a kid, and I've done it of Mrs. Reed's Standard 4 class, which was about 300 years ago, we wrote a poem every month. And we published it, and she made a book for us and gave it to us at the end of the year, and it was a present for our parents. My mother is now 96, and she's moved twice. So I don't know if she's still got my poem book, but I know she had it for a very, very, very long time. And of course at the start of the year you've got little, and you know, we did haikus and we did rhyming couplets and, you know, all sorts of things, and some of them were themed for the time of the year. But, I mean, you're absolutely right, you don't teach poetry in 2 weeks.
That's what's hard about Clinton County School.
That's what's hard about teaching in North Carolina and a whole lot of other states. But if you're doing this, if you're reading about Snowflake Bentley, could you write a poem?
Yes. You could describe the winter
Right.
in a list poem.
So maybe your objective is using descriptive language, so make it a poem. Okay. We, in the 3rd grade down at Northwood, we read The Little House in the Big Woods every year, which, phenomenal book. I realise now that there's some problematic aspects to it, but that's a whole separate discussion. We made things and we did things, and there were one of the activities I did was when she goes to the dance at Grandpa's house at Christmas, and Ma has this green dress, and the dress is described in incredible detail. One of my activities was you had to draw Ma in the dress. Now some of them are not artists, it's fine, I'm not looking at your scale, I'm not looking at, you know, but you've got to convey all of those details. You've got to go back to the text and look at those details and convey them visually to me. And I'm going to give you a number grade on whether you've achieved, because I can see it in the book. I can see all the things. It should be green, it should have little flowers on it. It says sprigs. We've discussed sprigs, we know what a sprig is. We've learnt a new word. So it has to have that on it, it has to have that on it. Some of them are incredibly detailed and you know, aesthetically incredibly pleasing. Some of them look like I drew it with my right hand tied behind my back and a blindfold on, but they've still got the details on them. They still understood what they read and they translated it into the picture, and that's what I'm conveying to the kids. I'm not grading the picture, not saying who's a better artist and who's not. I'm asking you to show me graphically if you have found all the details that I've asked you to find in that text. I could have done that by sending them back and asking them to list facts about something, but I got them to draw. Some kids are going to hate the drawing, some kids would far rather list the facts. But you've got a whole bunch of kids who need to draw. So anytime you can, and those are the sorts of things too that are, you can get a bit of pushback from admin, you can get a bit of pushback from parents. You know, why is my kid drawing a picture in the 3rd grade? Because your child's 9. And they need to. I can't believe this baby. I made a list of things, physical items, things to try and bring those kids in. Okay, so physical items, get them to make copies of something. So if I've pulled things out of my pocket from the Revolutionary War, you know, that a lady would have kept on her, she would have had this with her and she would have had this with her, and there's a fan. Make a fan. Make a fan. Just make a paper fan. Decorate it with crayons, because they're going to go, oh yeah, and well, what did you do today? We made a fan. What? And she had this, and she had this, and they didn't have this, and some kid's going to tell you all about air conditioning, and some kid's going to tell you about, you know, building a house with windows on both sides so the air flows through, because they've got a thing that they made that relates to something that they learnt. They haven't just had to listen, they haven't had to write notes, but they've got a physical thing at the end of it. The prep boxes I talked about, cooking, which is problematic. Kid experts, field trips. Where do we stand on field trips these days? Are we letting people take field trips anymore? What's happening out in schools?
Kids talking class anymore. I don't think they want field trips.
I mean, it's probably less now, even with COVID, I'm sure. Like, there's certain things they probably still can't go to for
Yeah.
studying. So it's probably is a lot less. Which is a great opportunity to teach, take them on a field trip.
You have a minimum of one field trip and it has to be an educational field trip.
Right.
It can't just be a field trip to a museum anymore. Like it has to be tied in, and it's kind of hard. Like the curriculum that you're teaching has to be tied into that, and like museums are like kind of out because like if you go to a museum, you have to sit in a classroom, and students don't like to do that anymore. So they really
Want
don't
to go
need.
to the museum?
Yeah, they really don't need to do museums. They really don't need to do field trips anymore.
They do indoor recess now.
Yeah, I've got two 15-year-olds and an 11-year-old. Thankfully, we've got some amazing teachers.
And I think thankfully now too, that virtual field trips.
At least, yeah.
You can do that, because I have to be in
How
a
many kids wants to
medium.
see it without being able to make it?
I know. I don't know what I mean, obviously COVID's changed things, but hopefully we're on the way. Hopefully we're on the upslide. Cape Fear Regional Theatre does matinees for schools, and they do the best Christmas pageant ever every year. They have done for like 30 odd years. And we used to read it down when I was down at Norfolk. We'd read the play, we'd read the book, and then I'd take the kids to play. So, and I mean, obviously at Northwood we've got a pretty specific demographic. The school voucher system, which again is problematic in some respects, but the school voucher system has made it private schools more accessible to small kids. But even in the kids whose parents are shelling out the money to go, bunches of kids have never been to a theatre performance, a live theatre performance. Our parents, when I said we're going to Cape Fear Regional Theatre, why are we taking them to a movie? You guys, people on the stage. Mind blowing for the third grade to see people on a stage singing and dancing. I wish all the Cumberland County kids could go and see that every year. And they do, a lot of the high schools, I think, actually. A lot of the high schools we'd be like often be the youngest crowd in the crowd. And I do remember there was a Junie B. Jones production that toured, that came to the Coliseum. I used to come to the Coliseum every year or so, and Cumberland County would sort of bus masses of children down to see that. Not as intimate as being at a small theatre, but still gives the kids an opportunity to experience something. So anytime there's anything that's available like that, if there's any way to get your kids on a bus, do it. And if you can't get your kids on the bus, get somebody to come in. There's more I know there's a lot of people that will come in and do field trips in school because schools are more reluctant to send people out. And then, I mean, you're back to Zoom. Things like, even go down to the Botanic Gardens, I guarantee you if you called up whoever their education officer is, if you couldn't get your kids there, guarantee you they'd do a Zoom with you. If they're the education person. And if they won't, they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. But trying to, I had a wee fellow one time, he was very tall, we were 6-year-old, and he was, I mean, tall kid, and he had a very deep voice. And he was always expected, he'd been tall the whole time. So, you know, as a 3-year-old, you know, he looks like a 4-year-old. And so he had a rough time because his behaviour didn't match what people expected him to do. You expect a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old to behave differently in public. And so he's the size of a 4-year-old but acting like a 2-year-old. And he struggled with school. Things did not click. We went on a field trip and we went hiking. It was part of our science stuff. His father, they had a nursery business. He was a nurseryman. And we got out there in the forest and he was with me because he was a bit of a behavioural handful. He's a busy boy. We got out there and he's like, that's a Nikau palm, they do this and this and the other, and that's this tree and they do this and this and the other, and these only grow in this part. The knowledge this kid had. He wasn't a classroom kid. And so once, and I had struggled with him because I was trying to make him do classroom stuff. But when I saw him out in that environment and realised what an absolute vast amount of knowledge that kid had, which of course made me realise that he's capable of all sorts of, he's capable of this, there's nothing else he's not capable of. We've just got to find a way to get that knowledge, that enthusiasm, for him to be able to shine in the classroom, because as soon as you start to feel better about yourself and your ability is going to catch up and improve. So those sorts of experiences help not just the kids, but they can really open your eyes as a teacher too.
But it's seeing the kids in a different environment, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Just, you know, I've done something simple here, like those big gazebos outside. I've taken students out and put them in the gazebo and have class in the gazebo when the weather's nice. And I'll get different reactions from students. When we're outside in the gazebo, they're in the classroom.
Yeah.
And so we took a field trip to the gazebo.
Yeah.
We did learning in the gazebo. It's amazing.
It's yeah.
Absolutely.
Come, you know, come and sit on the carpet. I've had people, you know, why are they doing carpet time in the 3rd grade? Because they're 9. Because they're 9 and they don't need to be sitting in a desk all day. Right, or I think that's what it is now.
And it's a good way for them to become like less tired, because sometimes they just need a brain break.
Yep.
And just standing up or doing some type of exercise or something.
Yeah.
Kind of will help.
I've noticed that a lot of teachers have done away with brain breaks in the classroom. I've also noticed that a lot of professors tell future teachers that brain breaks are a waste of time. I don't agree with that, but they'll say stuff like, well, the students didn't seem like they needed it. Well, they've been sitting in a desk all day, so whether they
Right.
seem like they needed it or not, they needed it.
We all need it after we've been, yeah. We used to do a brain gym, I think it was called, and you,
I'm just thinking of that brain gym.
Yeah.
Crossing
and
from
it's
side
you
to
crossing the midline
Yeah,
of your
crossing
body, and it
that's
sort of
it.
like engages. I don't know if there's science behind it. I don't know if it works or not, but you're like engaging the sides between the two sides of your brain.
Yeah.
Anytime you're crossing,
Yeah.
you're crossing the body. And I mean, I've always found in my experiences when the children are worst behaviours, when they need to have recess. The absolute
Yeah, and
worst thing you
and
can
then-
possibly do is, we're not behaving like this, we're not going outside.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Ridiculous.
Behavior to make it worse.
Yep. And I mean, I'm not about to say to people, listen, this isn't working. You people are not listening. We're not getting on with our work. I want everybody to put everything down. We're going outside. I'm putting 15 minutes on the clock. Go. Run. Whatever you need to do. And then we're lining up and going outside and we're going to finish this. And they know when they're acting up. They know it. You're not telling them anything new. But it's a brain break. Or sometimes just stopping what you're doing. I've had to do that too, on more than one occasion. When I thought it was going to go this way, and it's just not. You know what? We need to pack all this up. Everybody put it in your folder, everybody put it in the plastic bucket. We're going to put this up. 10 minutes of silent reading. Oh, it's not always the right answer, but a change, a stop for when those kids aren't acting right. Because either your activity's not right, or there is something just off in the classroom, whatever. But you've got to be prepared to make that sort of change. But again, these sorts of when you're doing all this busy hands-on stuff, it can be hard in the beginning because the kids are not necessarily trained to do it. So you're going to get kids who are acting the fool. You set expectations. You make sure they know how to do things. Maybe someone's incredibly frustrated because they literally can't cut things with their scissors. Some kids will be just, cut this for me because I don't want it, I want it right, I don't want to do it myself. No, you do it yourself. You need to get it done. But some kids are genuinely beside themselves frustrated that they need you to do that for them. I'm not a big do it for them fan, but sometimes you've got to step in and help that kid get over that hurdle. So you've got to make sure they've got the skills. And then, if you've got them trained to work, most of them are going to do it. Most of them are going to work through those stations. And it doesn't have to be, it's your choice. We either do this, we can do it this way, or we can go back to that workbook. It's up to you. What do you guys want to do? We want to stay making snowflakes and watching a slideshow about snowflakes. That's what I'd rather do. Okay, well then, you finish your cut and paste storyline thing, and then when you're done, you get on to the next thing. Simple as that. And they will come around. It's not always easy when you've been stuck like that, but they will come around. No? Okay, well, I guess we'll wrap it up.
And those are some good ideas to share. Simple, good, clear ideas.
Thank you.
And I think sometimes our students think everything is too hard, make it hard. It's real good, clear ideas. Do a lot.
But I think the hard part is that you're so not able to do these things anymore, like we could cook in the classroom and have real animals in the classroom and
Yes.
just
Yeah.
do all those things.
Yeah.
Even having guests in the classroom, I think, is difficult nowadays.
Definitely with COVID, but again, so much of us comes in